Welcome, everybody. My name is Richard Feldman, and I'm your host today for your SCORE webinar. We're at the top of the hour, so I thought we'd give the rest of our attendees a few more minutes just to click in. I'll be back to you in about a minute and a half. For those who have just joined us, my name is Richard Feldman. We are at the top of the hour, and we're giving the rest of the attendees a few more minutes, 1 or 2 more minutes to click in. We'll start in just about another minute. Okay, I guess now is a good time to start. I want to welcome everybody to SCORE Westchester's Selling Clinic, where you can make the most of your current sales opportunities. You'll gain confidence to plan and take the next sales steps to achieve greater success. Our presenter today is Paul Katzenstein, SCORE Westchester mentor. I want to take a moment to tell you about SCORE Westchester. The goal of SCORE Westchester is to foster vibrant small businesses through free mentoring and education. We serve our small business community by providing confidential business mentoring, webinars and workshops, extensive online educational resources. Our clients range from startups to established businesses, and our clients are served by our 45+ volunteer business mentors with a wide range of industry experiences in many areas that you can draw on. Reach us at any time at our telephone 914-267-6570 or westchester.score.org, or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Our presenter today, we're very fortunate to have Paul Katzenstein. Paul has an MBA in marketing and finance. He has spent his career in marketing, sales, and sales management positions in information technology and software. He has been mentoring in the area of entrepreneurs on these and other topics for over 4 years. Paul, it's all yours.
Great, Richard. Thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us today. It's going to be a helpful and valuable webinar for you. Just a few quick housekeeping things before we start. Everyone in the audience will be muted during the presentation. We are questions via the chat. Richard will be live on that.
And at the end of the presentation, which I think will be about 40 minutes or so, we'll hopefully cover some of the if you enter in. I'm sorry.
I apologize. Okay, we're going to start that all over again. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. Everyone in the audience, now not including me, is going to be muted during the presentation. If you have questions, please do submit them via chat. Richard's going to be monitoring that, and my presentation I expect will run about 40 minutes. At the end of that, I'm hoping we'll have some very good sales scenarios and issues that you guys submit. We'll have time to cover a few of them that Richard will tee up for us towards the end. If we don't have a chance to get to your either sales scenario or questions, I encourage you to follow up. Either I'll be happy to help you at another time through mentoring or contact, or maybe have you work with another SCORE mentor. Okay, we'll look to answer as many of the questions as we can. As well, we're going to be emailing everyone in the audience a summary of the contents of this, not the slides, but really a good summary cheat sheet that you'll be able to use to follow. That'll have really the very main pertinent information from the presentation part. So you'll be getting that automatically in an email following the presentation. Okay, again, what we're hoping is that this sales clinic today is going to give you some background in fundamentals, both on marketing and selling, a little bit on what the difference is between the two, a little bit about how the selling process can work. And all these pieces of information will hopefully help you become much more comfortable as you go out and sell. Selling is an important part of any business, small, medium, or large, because selling drives your revenue, and without revenue, you're really not going to see much of a business, coming down the road. In a brief agenda, we're going to cover a little bit of marketing. I call this marketing in minutes, very quick summary. I'm going to cover, again, sales processes, what the stages of the sales process are, prospecting and why that's important, some tips that you can look to take with you as you go about your sales efforts. And then at the end, again, cover your sales opportunities, a couple of those, review them, see what we can do to break through some issues and obstacles. And if we have time, answer any questions and answers. We're going to start with an audience poll, and we're going to ask everybody out there through Zoom, is your business a product, service, or both type of business? And then also, please let us know if we can send you more information on how to connect with a SCORE mentor. So we're going to give you about a half a minute to answer this, if you all could. Okay, we're going to close out the polling, and if we can present what the response is. So a little bit more in terms of the numbers of service-oriented businesses than product, and some of you are a little bit of both. Okay, we're happy to see that some of you would like to see some contact with SCORE mentors as well, so we'll work to follow up with you as well. Okay. A little bit on marketing. And there's much more that can be covered on marketing. I'm really just going to take a couple of slides to cover this now. Marketing can often be summarized in what's often called the 4 Ps as a way to easily remember a couple of key aspects of marketing. First and key is, what is your product? And with your product or service, you really need to understand and express what are the benefits and the value proposition that you're offering, and keep in mind the audience, the customers, the market that you're trying to address. The next P is promotion, and this can be pretty wide ranging. It can include ads, social media, trade shows. It can be both no cost, meaning free things in PR. You might place articles in local journals or magazines, or you may pay for advertising, or again, social media often could be no or low cost as well. The next P is price. Price, there have been some other webinars recently looking at pricing, SCORE webinars, and there are different ways you can approach pricing. Does it reflect your value to the client? Does it reflect a markup to your costs? When you price, are you offering incentives and deals? And how are you leaving room in your price for negotiation? And the last P typically is place, and that's how and where you're selling your products or services. Are you strictly local, like in the tri-state area around New York City? Are you national, global? Do you sell online? Do you sell through secondhand sellers like stores or outlets? Do you sell on Amazon? All of these various components make up your brand. Your brand is really a reflection of who you are, what your product and what your service really is representing to your audience, to your market. There are some other P's you may hear sometimes in describing marketing. They can include people, again, your market, positioning, and very important here, which is how do you position relative to your competition? It's very, very important you go out and understand and research your competition and understand how you relate to them. What is it your competition is doing that you like, that you might want to repeat? What is it they're doing you don't like, you might want to avoid? And where might there be opportunity that your competition is missing that might be a real opportunity for you to leverage and take advantage of? And then another P might be process. How do you go about through your marketing activities in defining a process? So a little bit more detail on these top 4 Ps in product. Again, we mentioned too, it's important that you research your competitors and that you really be clear in what makes you unique or different from your competition. What's the value or benefits? And by this, I mean really business benefits, personal benefits customers get from your product or service. This can be really hard to try to get a good sense of, but it's important that you try to write it down, to define it. And these are messages that you can reuse a lot in all the communications that you use for your business. Next, on promotion. And here I typically would say invest carefully. Like I mentioned in the last slide, a lot of promotion can be had at no cost. You know, again, you might find, you know, local online community newspapers or even national magazines or publications in your, you know, in your field that might print a PR piece on you at no cost. But when you do have to pay for promotion efforts, invest that carefully. Have some objectives and then look for the results. And you know, key here is set some expectations, try a campaign, test what you're doing, measure if you can what the results are. Did you have an impact? And then you try it again, test again. But if it's not working, I would tend to say fail fast. You know, don't overcommit money that you're investing until you know that something's working. And if you've, you know, invested a small amount and it doesn't work, you can just walk away from it quickly. Then on price, are you leaving enough headroom in your price to leave room for negotiations? And when you negotiate, can you give to get? So for example, if a customer says, hey, I want a discount or something like that, well, maybe you offer them something back in exchange for that discount. For example, you say, hey, if I give you this discount, can I use you as a public reference? You know, say that, you know, we've got you as a customer, something like that. Or can you price on value? And this is a tricky one. This also applies to luxury goods often too, where you can price well above a typical markup for the combined cost of your goods and the labor that goes into your product or service, but you've got a particular value or a perceived value that you can price on at a higher level. And then finally on price, where are your customers or prospects located? You have to have a good sense of that. Where do they tend to see or find information about products? So if you got a product and somebody be researching it, would they tend to start looking on Google? Would they look in a trade website? You know, try to get a good sense of where the best places to get visibility will be. And then also through places, do you sell directly or do you sell through partners? Okay, that's really going to be the summary on marketing. And again, marketing really applies to the broad set of communicating all these capabilities and benefits of your product or service to a broad range of people. Selling, if we get to a definition of selling, we're taking it down to more of a one-on-one level. Now you're identifying customers and finishing and completing transactions for them to purchase your products or services. So there's a difference there where marketing goes very broad, and marketing is important because it gets your message out, it defines who you are, but then selling, you take that message and you're using that one-on-one to try to get those sales through specific people, through specific companies. Okay, we're going to pause for an audience poll. If we can post this up in a second too. As we look at this, what's your personal comfort level with selling? So if you could take just 30 seconds to answer this. 1 is very uncomfortable. I'd rather let someone else do it. 2 is somewhat uncomfortable. 3 is, oh, I'm kind of okay with it. 4 is somewhat comfortable. And 5 is very comfortable. I'm a pro. Take a second, please, to answer that, and we'll post those in just a second. And if we can close the poll and post the results, we'll see. Oh, interesting range here. So pretty much all over the place, but some are pretty uncomfortable, and some of you look like you are pretty comfortable. So hopefully we're going to give everybody some good insight and tips to even move up that chain and get more comfortable, more successful with your sales efforts. Oops. Okay, a little bit on the sales process. And this process might be different based on your particular product and service. So this is pretty much generalized, but first is prospecting. And that is how and where can you find your list of customers. And again, it depends on what your product, what your service is. There are a lot of resources out there to go look for names of companies. If you're selling locally, maybe you want to appeal to a group of young parents in Westchester County. And is there, for example, a Facebook or Instagram group there that you can appeal to and advertise or promote through? As you go out and find these ways to do that, you start coming up with either companies or individuals, and you'll end up with a sales pipeline. As you have that list of prospects, you want to then say, hey, how qualified are these prospects? How will they benefit from your product? And do they have the money to buy it? And is the timing right for them to buy it? Or is it, oh, we're just kicking tires now, we're not going to be ready to buy something like this for a year or two? Then you want to approach and contact them. And that can be done in many different ways. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do this, more virtually in a couple of slides. But this can be done through an email and phone in normal times. Do it more face-to-face, perhaps. And as you need to, and depending again on your product or service, you might need a sales presentation. And as you do this, what you're really looking to do is a couple of things. A lot of selling, I would say, is really asking a lot of questions up front. I typically tell my SCORE clients, don't start out the sales process by trying to pitch your product. First, understand your prospect, understand your potential customer. What are their needs? What are their motivations? What's their timeline? And understand, what it is about your product, your service that's going to fix or address their needs or their pains. And as you're doing this through your sales presentation and through any kind of discussions, emails, whatever, you're trying to address that. You're trying to make sure that your customers and prospects understand the benefits and they agree that, oh yeah, I see that this will be a benefit that your solution can give me. Ask a lot of questions and listen. People will come back with objections. They may say, oh, your price is too high, or oh, this is too complicated to use, things like that. But you want to keep asking enough questions so you really understand the core of what they're saying and what their issue is. And with your knowledge of your product and service, answer them the best you can. Maybe they're missing something. Maybe there's something else you need to educate them about, or that you can educate them about, that will help them address and that will overcome those objections. And they'll say, oh yeah, you're right. I see that now. I don't have a problem with that anymore. Then as you get to the point where they're appreciating and understanding how your product or service will help them, you're working to negotiate and get to the close and ultimately get to a purchase. There are a lot of techniques that we can go in a lot more detail if we have more time, including things like what's called a trial close, where you say something like, if you could do this, or if the price were this, would you buy? And you're sort of like testing the waters. Key here too is that after you make the sale, and again, depending a little bit on your product or service, it's very important to follow up. Get feedback from your customers whenever you can. Get their testimonials. And if they'll let you, use those testimonials as you're going out to other prospects and too as well. If your customers you've sold to have any problems or issues, do what you can to fix those. Turn them into happy customers that can be referenced and can give you testimonials as well. So back to prospecting. A lot of people kind of say, oh, if I'm just going to put up a website, I'm going to wait for people to come to my website and expect that's going to drive your business. And from the cases that I've seen with people that have come to SCORE, that's often not the case. You have to take some steps to actively go out there and look for those customers and make sure you're promoting. Just a passive website often just doesn't do the trick for people. And if you're prospecting, then you're building to a pipeline of deals. So if you don't close a deal say in February that you were counting on, hopefully you got another one in the pipeline you can turn to hit your objectives for getting the revenue for your business that you're hoping to get. But it's really important that before you start, you do the marketing things that we talked about. You really need to understand and define, what your mission is, what your value proposition is, the things we talked about earlier, because that's going to come through a lot, and that's going to help you in your selling efforts. If you don't have that, you're going to probably come out being a little confusing as you try to sell your products too. Then keep asking yourself, who's a qualified prospect for you? Who will have the kinds of problems and pain you can solve for you, and how do you find them? Keep researching, keep looking out there. How can you find your market? Keep brainstorming for ways that you can connect with your prospects. There's zillions of ways out there now, particularly with all the social media and internet ways of accessing people. There's still email. If you're collecting people's emails, that's an inexpensive, essentially free way for you to have targeted ways to send messages out to people. Seminars are great. Right now, you probably see there are loads of these kinds of webinars that local libraries, that local education programs are putting on. So if you've got a product or a service where you can help educate people and perhaps use that as a way to have them come to you to buy products or take on more services, that can be a really effective way of prospecting and promoting yourself. And again, track your efforts. You don't need to track every single thing, but have a good sense of what's working, what's not working. And again, keep it in mind, fail fast. If something's not working, move on, brainstorm, and try the next kind of campaign idea you have. Okay? Couple of tips to selling effectively. Some of this may apply more if you're selling higher priced, higher value products, but some of it applies right across the board. But research your customer, research your market, understand what their pains are, what their needs are, and how your product and service can help address those. If you're selling higher value stuff or selling one-on-one, plan your sales calls, plan your efforts. This is really helpful and important. As you walk in, they'll say you have a meeting with somebody tomorrow morning, even a phone call or a Zoom. What are their needs, but also what are your objectives? What do you hope to come out of the meeting with? How are you going to open up the call? It's best to have a couple of questions in mind. Again, you don't want to start off pitching right away, pitching your product. But if you have some good questions, that will lead to more questions, to more discussions. And that's a great way to build your comfort level and confidence in these kinds of sales discussions. Also keep thinking, can you either upsell? Can you sell more or higher end products or services that you may have available, or cross-sell related products? So, you might be selling product A, but hey, maybe there's something else that you can add on to that to make it a bigger bundled kind of a sale. Also, as you're selling too, depending again on what it is your business is focused on, if you can sell again to the same customers, selling to an existing customer is much less cost than trying to get a new customer. Again, you got to go out and prospect and go through all these steps. But if you have an existing customer and something where you can either keep selling them something repeatedly year to year, what have you, or sell them a new product in the future, much easier to sell to an existing customer. Now I'm going to take a look. This is pretty interesting, and think about how you go about as you buy something significant. Let's say you're going out and buying a car or a major appliance, and let's look at the stages that pretty much everybody goes through, whether you're aware of it or not, in this process of looking to buy something. And first is awareness. Do people know that your product or service exists? That comes back to marketing. Basically saying, here we are, and contact us if it looks like we can address some needs or pains you have. Then you need to establish some interest, that prospect really does have a need and sees value in what you can offer. Next is somebody qualified? Do they fit? Do they agree that your solution, your product will solve their problems? And is their time frame or budget something you can understand and something that's going to give you a sale in the right kind of time frame? Finally, after you've established that somebody is qualified, you want to get them committed. So they confirm that they need and they're ready to buy your solution. Then you get into negotiation, again, depending on your product and service and whether you have something that you're going to negotiate or discount price at all. And then finally, you're going to close and make the sale. So think again, if you're out buying a major appliance, think about it, 30 years ago, people were just starting to buy microwaves perhaps. Did somebody really know that a microwave existed? And then they're interested, and you have to go through these steps essentially to get to the point of actually getting to a sale of a product. Okay. Again, if you're selling again to larger organizations or somewhat more complex sales, I'm going to cover this one very quickly. If within a large company or any kind of a complex organization, you're going to have people that are going to have different kinds of roles. And sometimes I'm working right now, for example, with a client that's facing, I'm working with large companies. So we have to look at whether they're working with somebody who's at a level where they're just an influencer. They might be a person who actually needs the product or service. They may be a little bit more important, be able to actually recommend it, but ultimately you're going to have a decision maker. The decision maker is the person who's going to have the final ability to say, yes, we're going to spend money on this. But you still need to understand the value and the business benefits your buyers should see in your product and services. Sometimes you can even build a sales theme. You can say, hey, we're easier to use than the competition, or we're going to give you much faster time to success than the competition. So if there's something you see there, keeping it simple, keep repeating something like that can be helpful in getting a message across to multiple people when multiple people are involved in making that decision. Sometimes it's important to understand a buyer's personal motivations. If you're selling to somebody in a company, are they looking for a promotion? Are they looking just to save money? Are they looking to increase sales? Again, just like before, you need to understand if they have objections to what you're trying to sell, understand them, ask questions and make sure you do understand, and then see if you can address them and say, oh, well, here's something about what we're selling that will address your objections. We need to help you understand that your objection just wasn't really quite the case. We talked about the trial close too, and ultimately get to the final sale. Selling in a virtual world. I don't see it as being that different from pre-pandemic. You still need to go through the basic steps. Understanding your clients, researching them, understanding their pains. You can use, obviously, tools like Zoom and other virtual tools to connect even face-to-face and visually. The phone has been around, it's been an effective selling tool for a long time. Email makes selling even more effective to large numbers of people. And the key is, can you build a better relationship with video calls? And if you can, then use those tools as well, and see if you can't go face-to-face virtually with people and work on that to build the right relationships. And if video helps in presenting your product and solution, then absolutely leverage whatever you can out of Zoom and similar tools to say, hey, let me show you a presentation, let me show you a demonstration, let me show you pictures, what have you, of your product or solution, if that helps. One thing that's key too, I think, is that you're going through the prospecting and sales steps is having a good way and process of keeping track and managing all that information. And here's something that I've used and companies I worked for through my career used as well, which is to basically log in your sales opportunities and update them from time to time. So here, for example, we've got 2 opportunities. We've got the name of the company. We've described what the opportunity is. What's the total value? What's important here is at any point in time, what's the probability that you're actually going to make the sale? And what you can do that's helpful too is if you take the value. So if you're going to have a $50,000 deal, and right now you think you got 25% odds of selling it, you multiply the 2 together, and that tells you it has what's called an expected value of 25% of 50,000 or $12,500. And that's kind of important too, because that helps you measure your pipeline. Do you have enough opportunity in your pipeline to drive the revenue for this month or for this quarter that you're hoping to drive? Next is the sales stage. We talked about those. So where is this deal in the sales stages? Well, right now it's only 25%. So they're just expressing interest. And really, really important is what are the next steps and what's the time frame for closing for the next steps in the deal. So here we're saying we're going to meet and demonstrate. We're going to do it in November, and we think we can close in December. The next deal, just to look at the final couple of columns to the right, this one's further along. This one, we've gotten to the commitment stage. We're at the point now where we're negotiating price and terms. We can do that pretty quickly. We think we're going to close it in October. But it's important to do this and list this out and look at it, whether it's once a week, whatever frequency works for you. But this helps you say, hey, what do I need to come back to? What do I need to do? Who do I need to contact to keep moving my deals forward and taking those next steps? Okay, so I think this is a really useful, very easy tool. Anybody with a piece of paper and pen can start doing. Okay, and so I'm coming to the end of my presentation part, but some of the key next steps and takeaways are really important. Research your competition, understand where you want to be in position relative to your competition. Please work on developing your marketing messages and plans. And this can be really difficult. A lot of people either don't like writing about themselves or about their products, but it's really important to try to get stuff in writing that clearly says, what is your mission of your product or service? What are the benefits? And again, once you do that and get that written down, it's stuff you're going to use over and over, both maybe on your website, in your emails, in advertisements, in your selling pitches and things like that. Hopefully you've all heard about elevator pitches. Really helpful to have a way to describe what it is you're selling in something you can express in probably 60 seconds or less. Very important to understand what's unique or different about your product and its benefits to your customers as well. How are you different from the others? If you're just like everybody else in your competition, you're going to end up competing on price, and that's often not very comfortable because everybody just keeps slashing price down to the bone. So if you can find a way to be unique and stand out, then you can establish more value and justify a higher selling price. A lot of entrepreneurs will invest a lot to start up their businesses, but don't focus on some of the marketing planning and forecasting their sales. I've seen people who will go out and, for example, set up a website, buy a lot of Google Analytic tools, and then come and say, hey, I've set up my website, I've got all these tools, and I'm just not selling anything. Well, if you don't have the marketing messages, if you don't understand your market, if you're not making the connection between your value and getting your message out to your market, it's not like if you build a website, they're going to come. You need to take those extra steps. And really key here is just sell, sell, sell. In fact, I've been in organizations where there's a common line that says everybody sells. If you're in customer service, you sell. If you're in accounting, you sell. Everybody should be promoting you, your business, your product, your service, and helping you drive more sales. So with all this, hopefully these have been some helpful pointers and tips. I'm going to look to take some cases now that we can talk about that you've entered in on the chat. Please consider working with a SCORE mentor. Again, here's our online URL. You've got our phone number as well. I will have my email up on a slide in a little bit too. So if you have questions you want to get to me directly, please do that through email as well. Again, we hope this has been helpful. Richard, I'm going to ask if you can tee up if we've got any particular sales cases that we'd like to tee up now.
Yeah, Paul, first question. How do you prospect customers?
Richard, you're on mute.
Paul, did you hear me? Paul, did you hear me?
Okay, not hearing Richard. I'm going to go to one that I have here. And I'm seeing too that there's been some background noise. We didn't have that earlier, so I hope that hasn't been a problem. So I've had a SCORE client that recently came up with this scenario. And they have a prospect. The user's satisfied with their product and solution, and he's helped pitch it to his boss. But the boss is so busy that the decision-making gets stuck there. The user doesn't want to bother to push the boss too much, so he gave the boss's email to our SCORE client. The client sent an email to the boss and copied the user, but got no response. And the user said the boss is really busy right now. So what should we do now to push the boss a little bit more to move forward? So the key is, what can we do here to get the boss's attention? So we've touched on a couple of things through the presentation that I think can help us address this. And here are a couple points. It's a pretty busy slide, but let's walk through these. And I think the key thing here is, if you take some of the principles we've gone through here and some of the things even that will be on the email that's going to get sent out after this webinar in the next day or so that you'll get, that'll give you some ways to, I think, brainstorm some ways to kind of break through issues and obstacles like this. So first, I'm going to say not all deals will close in the time frame that you, the vendor, want them to, and that's just a reality. And that's why having a pipeline is really important. So if a deal doesn't close, say in February as you want, hopefully you got others sitting there in your pipeline that you can turn to and say, hey, do I have something that will backfill a deal that all of a sudden isn't going to happen, or that, maybe unfortunately even you lost. In this case, the scenario we just talked about, if the boss is the decision maker and the obstacle, can you find out more from your contact, who's hopefully a sponsor? I think we said in the earlier email that yes, this person wants to get to the boss and wants the boss to help bring this product in. Find out if you can, if the contact can help you with what are the boss's priorities and what benefits might the boss see. So it's much better to say something like, Joe and I spent time looking at your company's processes and potential improvements, and we found that our product can help your company save $2 million a year from a $100,000 investment. And that might work better than just saying, hey, boss, I'd like to get some time with you and talk with you about our product. So if you can give them some compelling reasons why they should talk to you, that's going to make it much more likely you're going to get a response. Another approach, and you have to be careful with this one, if the deal is big enough and significant enough to you, is see if there's other people in the organization you can deal with, either at the same level or a higher level. And you have to be careful here not to try to go around people that in a way that might tick them off and offend them. But if you're prepared in doing it and you have the right reasons for doing it, maybe you find somebody else who you can connect with and get the right kind of response. In essence, it's not a magic answer, but if you can connect and understand more of the pain and the needs of a boss or anybody you're selling to, and connect the value that you can provide to them, you're going to have a much better likelihood of success. Okay. With that, I'm going to ask again, Richard, if you're there and can come off mute. Any cases you've come up with that you'd like to bring up?
Paul, can you hear me now?
And I'm looking at the chat now, and I'll just read a couple that I have here.
Paul, can you hear me now?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. You know what? I had my speaker turned down, so we didn't get the feedback. So yes, go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
Richard. Okay.
We have a couple of questions here which deal with people's concern about discussing cost. How do they become more comfortable discussing cost with a customer?
Okay. Excellent question. With cost, it's a question of, do you have what I would call a published official price list, or are you pricing every deal individually? If you can have an official price list, again, this is going to be your standard selling price to everybody. Then ask yourself, is that something you want to make public to everybody, or do you want to use it only at the time when you're selling, when it's appropriate? You don't want to produce cost or a proposal to a customer too soon. That oftentimes can just result in somebody coming back right away and saying, well, sorry, the cost seems too high. Oh, I want a discount. Oh, can we get a 20% discount as soon as you show them the cost? So you want to make sure that you've really both got a good understanding that they see the value that you're presenting before you start showing them your costs. And that the key in that is the word value. If they see that you're solving their problems, if you're alleviating some of their pain, the cost piece will be so much easier for you to talk about, because then you also will feel more confident, because you're becoming really the consultant to them at that point. You're helping them solve a problem. You're saying, oh, hey, I've got a way to fix this. And if in your discussions with them, you even have a way of figuring out how much you're either going to save them or how much new sales you're going to help them generate, or how much easier you are than a competitor they're looking at. That will also help you understand and justify your discussions of cost and price with them. Again, with that, cost also often involves negotiation. And if somebody's coming to you and asking for a discount, for something, something different in terms of terms, a key concept I would say is give to get. If you're going to give a discount, is there something you can get back in value that will help? So for example, whenever you're giving a proposal, it can be helpful to put a time deadline on it. So for example, every proposal you put out, you might say this is valid for 60 days, 90 days, what have you, or it expires March 30th of 2021. And then you say, well, guess what? If you can get me a deal by, sign this order by February 28th, I can give you an extra 8% discount, but have a timeline in it so you're getting something back in return. Or you say, if somebody says, hey, can you give me a 10% discount? You say back, well, if you'll agree that we can make you a public reference and give us a testimonial, I'd be happy to give you that discount. So again, understand the value and then look to do a give to get. So I'm hoping that addressed it, Richard. Any more questions that you'd like to bring up?
Yes, here's one very specific. How do you sell to buyers in a clothing showroom?
I'm sorry, in a clothing showroom?
Yes. In other words, I believe the question really deals with how do you show a buyer for a store when you're working in a clothing showroom?
I'm assuming that has to do with the difficulty of going face to face during the pandemic
Could be.
in a clothing showroom. If whoever asked the question, if you can clarify a little bit in the chat to Richard, that would be great. But I'm assuming the case is how do you do that when you can't go face to face? And I would come back and say again, if you can use Zoom or do something visual online, hopefully that works. A key thing with using a tool, tools like Zoom or online tools like that is if you can get to more than one person, perhaps two. Maybe turn it into an event where you're basically saying, hey, rather than going one-on-one with a buyer, maybe you get the whole group, within that buyer's team or what have you to attend like a Zoom event or something like that. So you're getting, even broader coverage and hopefully more effectiveness in what you're doing. So I'm hoping I understood the question. I hope that answered it. But Richard, if you get clarification, that'd be great. If not, you've got another question to tee up, that'd be great too.
Okay, another question right now. What is the best way to identify your customer and where do you look for them?
Again, I'm going to say to identify your customer and then go look for them, you got to step back to the real basics. And that is, the first step is, what is your product or service? And, summarize that in a short statement. And in that, try to have what's often called a value proposition. I mean, what is it about your product or service how does it give value to the people who are buying it? Then the next step would be to say, hey, who has the need or the pain or the desire to buy this product or service? And it could be, again, young parents, between 25 and 40 in Westchester and Fairfield County, for example. And when you've got that identified, or it could be, for example, maybe people who are interested in, cooking across all of America, which would be a much broader market. But once you have that identified, then you can start saying, okay, what are the channels? What are the either Instagram channels or Facebook groups, things like that you might use, or what are the publications, online or printed, that you can use to get to that market? Now, a lot of times too, you may be able to extend and move into other markets as well, but I would say test that, but at least have an idea of what is your core market, your core focus, work on that, And again, see what works. If it doesn't work, try the next thing and move on. And again, that's where, you know, in the mentoring discussion too, we can work on brainstorming ideas like that. Okay,
Okay.
Richard, next one.
Next question, Paul, really deals with pricing. And the question is, the attendee wants to know whether or not they should post their prices on their website. The attendee says, I keep hearing conflicting reports and information about this.
Great question. And I'm going to say I have to answer that with it depends. It depends on your product or service. It depends on what your competition and market do. Because once you do that, you know, clearly you're exposing your pricing to your competition, you know, very, very easily as well. I'd say key to that too is, will posting your pricing on a website help your chances of you know, driving your sales, and do you need to do it? Now, for example, if you have a website where you're selling products online, you have to show the prices there, for example. So again, it's going to depend, but you know, if you have a way of saying, please, you know, you'll as you look at other websites, and this is also why it's important to look at competition too, to see what they do. A lot of websites will say, contact us for price quotes, contact us for proposals. So there's no easy yes or no answer to that. It's really going to depend.
Okay, Paul. Next question. How do you research your competition as far as cost and price for similar services, as everyone is very private about the cost of their services?
Yep, great question. Couple of pieces of answer to that is, you know, if there are, you know, resources, again, if you can, you know, browse online, if you can even go to your library, and look for materials that might list some of those competitors and have their prices, great. What some people and companies will do will be to contact competition directly and work on getting price quotes. And it happens all the time, and it's one way to go out and try to, you know, get a sense of, you know, where have they put the stake in the ground in terms of their pricing. Ideally, as you're competing and as you're selling, you're going to be able to sell on more than just price. It's good to have an idea of price. And by the way, another way to get a sense of price is feedback from your customers. If they're talking to your competitors, I don't know that you necessarily want to say to them, well, how's our price relative to our competition? But many times they will offer that up freely to you and say, hey, you're more expensive, you're less expensive, whatever, you're in the ballpark. But hopefully you've got much more that you can compete and sell on than price alone. You can understand where that value, where that unique differentiation is that you can offer that can justify the price that you're putting out there. Okay, Richard, next.
Okay. How many times do you contact a prospect that has expressed interest in your product, like a lead generation system, and you are unable to reach them through phone calls and emails?
Yep. It happens all the time, that you will reach out to people by phone, by email, you won't get a response. I think there's a couple of pieces there we can look at. One is the frequency of how often you try to follow up and contact them. And another is, you know, how many times you do it. So you don't want to be doing it every other day. And this actually brings up a good point that I don't think I mentioned through the presentation, which is at each stage, at each contact you have with a prospect, try to get a clear agreement on not just what the next step is, but when you're going to do it. So if you're talking with somebody or emailing with them, to whatever extent you can, try to say, hey, can we follow up and either talk in 2 weeks? And I will call you, or let's pick a time. So if you can set that next step, that will, you know, get you out of the problem of blindly just trying to email them and get a response again. Sometimes people you know, may show interest, and you know, they may, for even legitimate reasons, lose interest. They may have been fishing for information when they contacted you the first time and really don't have the sincere interest to follow up. That can happen. But what also helps too is just like we did on the example we have, I have on the screen now, is if you can have more of a compelling, argument or compelling statement of why they would want to talk with you. So hopefully you've learned enough to say, hey, here's what I understand about your needs, or how our product and service can help you. And in your contact to them, whether it's in a voicemail, whether it's an email, have something in there that says, hey, we've talked about how we can, save you 20% from your total costs by implementing our solution. And I'd like to follow up with you, et cetera. Hopefully that will drive you forward. If you absolutely hit the brick wall, it comes back to another point we just had on this screen too, which is, hey, is there somebody else, related in that organization that you can possibly contact, and kind of break that logjam too, if you think you've got, a really viable prospect there.
Okay, Paul?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. I have one here which can help you lead into a one-on-one session with SCORE mentors. Do you help in developing a sales pitch before meeting with a buyer?
Absolutely. It goes back to, I think, something we had on one of the slides earlier, which is to plan your sales calls. Again, depending on what it is you're selling, depending on who it is you're selling to, if you can go out and research them in advance, not just the company, but maybe the individual a little bit too, and be prepared. Again, it really depends on what you're selling, but through much of my career, we were selling fairly high-priced software solutions. And if you're selling to a large company, you'd start out by getting their annual report. You would look at a lot of their information online. You'd understand, what their executives are trying to do in a general mission with the company, so that you can basically line up with that in how you're planning your sales call. So for example, if the CEO of a company says, hey, our mission right now is to eliminate errors in pharmaceutical manufacturing, and maybe you got a product that can somehow help you do that, you want to focus and tee on that. Okay, so research what you can, try to match up capabilities that you can offer to the particular needs up and down the line of an organization. Okay.
Okay, Paul, we had a few people asking for your email address.
We'll get to that. Talk to that. Yeah, run the questions. Boom. Here it is. Thank you. In fact, it's a good time to get to an audience poll. Tell you what, if we can break to the poll now, and this is, I'm working here to get marketing feedback from all of you. And this is something you should all do as well as you make your sales. So how helpful was this webinar to you? Scale of 1 to 5, 5 being very helpful, 1 being not helpful at all. And we'll give it a couple of seconds and take a look. Okay, if we can post the results. Okay. Now, even with this, it's it's good to get the feedback, and honestly too, it'd be great, and you should look to do the same thing too. If somebody does not find your product, your service helpful, see if you can get more feedback from them. What could have improved it? And obviously, you go, you probably get surveys all the time from companies. Marketing research has been exploding like never before, especially as more and more people buy on the internet, and it's rare that you can buy a product online that you're not going to get something a couple of days or a week later asking you for feedback, asking you for a review of the product. So it's part, make it part of what you do as well. Just make it a continuous loop that you're selling something. Afterwards, make sure that your customer is happy, but say, hey, how do we do, and what can we do to do better? Richard, any more questions or other sales cases that we can touch on?
Yeah, here's one for you. Any suggestions for breaking into a B2B service industry? We provide sign language interpreting services, which often indirectly benefit buyers, employees, or customers, but rarely the buyer themselves. How can we communicate a value added, especially for customers who already have a long-term identified provider aside from price?
That's a very interesting one. So basically, as I heard it, Richard, it's a sign language interpretation service.
That's what I see here.
Gotcha. Very interesting. So really, you're in a pretty unique position. So I would say first, well, hopefully you understand, the users of that kind of service enough, or who would be in the needing to use it. And then the key is, what kinds of companies, how do you reach them? Are there publications or websites focused on the deaf that will help you promote your offering there? And is that where people who might need to buy your solution would be looking? It's really, again, going back to, who will be the key users? Who's your market? Where do they tend to look for information? How can you get your message into, again, those channels, whether it's somebody else's website, whether it's a publication, things like that. But when you're in a very specific area like that, it makes it, both a little more interesting, a little more challenging to find the right focus.
Okay,
Okay, Richard,
Paul,
any
we have
others?
Paul, there are a few questions here, which basically deal with contacting a SCORE chapter for on one-to-one, one-on-one mentoring. You want to go back to that slide?
For one-on-one mentoring,
Yeah,
back to the beginning. This one?
right.
Okay, so folks, here is a phone number you can call to request a mentor. The website posted here, westchester.score.org, has a list of the mentors in the Westchester SCORE chapter. Typically, when you connect first with SCORE, if you haven't worked with us or with a mentor before, you'll be asked for a little bit of background on what you're looking for. So the more you can tell SCORE up front, the better we can match you with the appropriate mentor. And I'll mention here too, that with now about 45, 50 or more mentors just in Westchester alone, each of us have different backgrounds and expertise. So if you have particular needs, maybe for financial or accounting support, or for legal support, and in my case too, for marketing or sales support, we have others who are have greater backgrounds in social media than I do. We can match you up with a more appropriate mentor, the more information you give us. So hopefully that helps address that question. Think so, Richard?
Yes, it does. It's also one here that specifically says, can they mentor with you?
Happy to take on what I can. Each of us typically mentors, 1 or so days a week. Please reach out again to the phone number. You've got my email. I would ask, if you have specific questions, send them to me through my email. If you're looking to set up a mentoring session, please go through either the website or the phone number.
Okay, and here's one that just came in. How do you deal with competition from offshore consulting services that are a fraction of the US price?
Good question. Again, being in the software and technology business, I saw that frequently. And typically you've got to find what those differentiating factors are where you think you can compete and you can provide, good relative value. So part of it, obviously too, now that we're such an interconnected virtual world, it's not that hard for somebody in the US to set up a Zoom session with someone in, say, India or wherever, and talk to an offshore consultant at a much lower cost there. The question is, can you provide, better support, a better result, really, through either face-to-face, more local presence? Do you have particular expertise that maybe the offshore consultants don't? You got to really look for where you've got that unique capability that's going to make a difference. Richard, get another?
Okay, I think you pretty well covered it here, Paul. Let me just
Okay.
run through
Folks, we're
here.
at the top of the hour. Great timing here. I'm going to say again, thank you all very much for joining. I do hope this was helpful. If you do have suggestions for how to improve it, I welcome you to send me emails on that. Any other questions just before we wrap up?
I think you've got all the questions
You
here.
got it all? Great. I think we're
Very
going to
good.
close out
Great
now.
job,
We
Paul.
encourage you guys to contact SCORE if we can help you with any mentoring. We'll mention too that we provide lots of webinars. So hopefully you're on our email lists. And as well, there's a wealth of information at the SCORE national website, which is score.org. Thanks very much, everyone.